Well, that's a way to do it. Just fix these up here. Have the mic as so. Let's do this thing. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome in. Welcome in to Shumake Take Rants, Episode 3. I am Garrett Shumake, and we got to talk about something very, very important today. And I'm here to talk to you about how the debate about rings, championships, however you want to call it, it's overrated. It's overrated as heck, and it's a debate that, quite frankly, I have never been able to understand. As you can tell, before we start, I have the headphones back, figured out what was wrong with the mic issues. So hopefully now it should be working, and now I have consistent audio. And also, I'm recording on a beautiful Saturday afternoon instead of a Friday evening. So we got a bunch of light, letting natural light flood into the room instead of just the typical fan light. It's probably not as consistent because it's coming from one direction compared to, coming straight at me. It's coming from my left than it is coming from straight at me. But at the same time, there is enough lighting in this room for me to look pretty decent, I guess. So without further ado, I don't have much to talk to you about after that. We got to get right into this debate. And the first things first, but like a little bit of disclaimer, I'm not here to talk about how, like, when I say the debate is overrated, I'm talking about in how people like interpret and view championship rings, or view rings, how they view championships, because it feels like there's two like completely wide-ended spectrums. On one end, you have people that act like rings are the be all and end all. Like, just because this player has this many rings, that makes them a GOAT. And I'm gonna say it. This is the argument that a lot of Michael Jordan supporters make when talking about the GOAT debate in basketball. And I'm gonna tell you right now, just because Michael Jordan has 6 rings does not make him the GOAT. I'm not saying like someone else is the GOAT over Michael Jordan. I'm just saying just because he has 6 rings does not mean that he's just automatically the GOAT because he has more rings than anybody else. And what happens is they say this, and all it does is it treats rings as another statistic, which it is. That's a fact, but they treat it as another statistic. Like when people like compare stats and all that, they just treat it as another statistic to measure. Oh yeah, because this person has more rings, that means they're better, right? Like how they compare like, for example, like in football they compare passing yards, touchdowns, whatnot, and they determine, okay, yeah, they're a better player because they have better stats. And this, all it does, it completely undervalues. Well, no, it overvalues. It overvalues the significance of rings because they treat it as if it's the Godfather, it's the it is the be all end all. And it's not. There's a lot of different things that go into determining greatness in a player and determining greatness in the amount of championships that you win. And on the other end of the spectrum, people love to, while they don't treat it as the be all end all, and they don't treat it as a just plain on paper statistic. We all know that stats don't tell the whole story. That's a phrase as old as time in human history playing sports. Just because you have all these numbers, just because you have all these numbers and statistics, they don't tell you the whole story. If a team, let's say a final score of a game was like 45-41, and you look at the box score and you're like, oh shoot, I missed that game. I should have watched it. But in reality, the losing team scored like 3 touchdowns in garbage time when the game was practically over and just made the box score look better. In reality, the game wasn't that competitive as it showed. That's just a prime example, but there's many different examples showing that. And when it comes to the opposite end of the spectrum of people acting like the rings are the be all end all, they understand this. They understand that stats don't tell the whole story. But what they do is they try to tell the story and over contextualize that story to diminish the value of rings. Using an actual football analogy here instead of Jordan, let's talk about Tom Brady. When you talk about his 7 rings, there's the meme that's out there right now that's been out there for years with him and all of his rings, and on each little ring it shows like the reason why like it's not as valuable. And the big one is like his first three. Oh, he was carried by a defense. Oh, his kicker bailed him out. And it's, well, hold on a minute. They still won the Super Bowl. I mean, it doesn't take away from the fact that he played well in each of those games. Oh, I don't think he played well in his first Super Bowl win. But at that point in time, he got there, he played, and his team did enough to win. And what they want to do is they want to take the fact that they want to. How do I put this? I mean, I guess I already said it how I wanted to. They over contextualize the situation and of the game itself, of the championship game, to diminish the value of the ring and make it not as important. And it's like, why are we doing this? Why do we purposely undervalue or overvalue rings to talk about the greatness of a player and argue their greatness? It completely takes away from the significance of a championship ring and also takes away from the actual significance of their measure of greatness. And in order to talk about that, you got to talk about how do you measure greatness and how championships measure that. Going to my trusty script here. This thing has never failed me. No, actually, no, it did. It actually did. Fun fact: last episode, episode 6, when I was covering the offensive line prospects. If you, I hope you guys will watch that video. It was really fun to make, by the way. But regardless, there was a point in there where I literally tried to read off something for Talisa Fuaga, and it literally just would not compute in my head. I guess it's not that my script failed me. It's more like I failed the script. I just couldn't read it. But bottom line, script has never failed me yet. So we got to talk about how championships measure greatness in general. We'll get to like individual players in a second. But they measure greatness, of course, because championships are the peak. They're the top. Like, there's nothing better that you can win than winning the Super Bowl, winning the NBA Finals, winning the World Series, winning the FIFA World Cup, whatnot, what have you, right? But, and it signifies, oh my God, it signifies, a team or player, we'll get to that in a minute, showing that they showed up. They rise to the occasion and when it mattered most, and it demonstrated their ability to play their best when the lights shined brightest. And you cannot talk about this situation without talking about Tom Brady. And I'm not just, and the reason why, and it's not because, oh, Tom Brady won 7 Super Bowls. It's because it's not just that Tom Brady just showed up in the playoffs and won a bunch of Super Bowls. It's that this was him. He did this every single game, every single week practically. I mean, there's a reason why when there's like a minute left and your team takes the lead and you give the ball back to the Patriots, everyone says you gave Brady too much time. There's a reason for that. And peak performance, like overall, it shows that no matter what, you're able to step up and show up when it matters most. And that's ultimately like the biggest takeaway when it comes to when a team winning the Super Bowl for football. We're going to get back to football, centralize it down for a second. But for football, when you win a Super Bowl, that's what that means. I mean, it means when it mattered the absolute most, when everything was on the table, all or nothing, you came out on top and you showed that you could do it. And of course, the second reason why, or the second, I opened up my keyboard. But the second thing with how championships measure greatness is, of course, its historical value. Because it showcases the team's dominance over a year or a couple years. Either way, when you win the Super Bowl, that's etched in history. It's there forever as long as humans are around, unless we somehow destroy ourselves and all of our advancements have just gone, they just go to nothing. But we're not going to worry about that right now. We're not in an apocalypse. Not yet. I hope not. Anyways, it's a historical event. And no matter what happens, no matter how you want to diminish the value of the winning team or you want to overvalue it, no matter what you do, no matter what it is, no matter what happens, all the debates don't matter in the grand scheme. I mean, none of this matters in this grand scheme of things. But it's the fact that no matter what happened, winning the Super Bowl is etched in history. It's a piece of history that your team will stick with for as long as they exist. And the big third third thing, third thing here is that winning the Super Bowl not only is it the ultimate form of showing up when it matters most, it's the ultimate peak form of, let me prepare myself for this, teamwork and cohesion. Do you hear that? What did I just say? Teamwork. Teamwork is, it requires a collective effort, not just to win the Super Bowl, to win anything in team sports. It requires a team, requires a group of players to go out there and do their job and win. And winning the Super Bowl highlights that ability for a team to function as a unit at the highest level, and each player doing everything they humanly can to make it happen. And that's something that gets lost as well. Like, I'm not gonna go into like the talent debate about how, oh, this player has this player needs more weapons. Oh, this player is carried because he has as many weapons. I went enough through that while I was making this script, ranting about it, and I decided I'm not going to, because while it is related, it's not what we're talking about. I might put that for rants, maybe rant 5, because rant 4 we're talking about evaluating draft prospects. But that's besides the point. I'll go into more in depth into that a little bit, but like just for the gist of what you need to know, it ultimately takes teamwork to win the Super Bowl. That's obvious. But the thing is, when you talk about like, oh, Brady was carried his first 2 Super Bowls because he had a great defense and kicker, like I talked about earlier. It's a load of bull. I'm not gonna say the other following word after that, but it's a load of bull. It's a load of crap, bull crap, because it takes everyone to win, and it doesn't matter if he had a good defense or not. It doesn't matter. It's the fact that they all had to be there. They all had to show up in some form of capacity in order for that to happen. And then after that, there are some counter arguments that I want to address when it talks about measuring greatness. So those are like the big ones that measure greatness in general, of why championships measure greatness. But here's a couple counter arguments that people like to make. The first one is that regardless of of the significance or whatnot, all the context behind it, the Super Bowl is a single moment in time. And it is true that one big play or one bad call can sway the game in a team's favor. Cough, cough, cough. David Tyree helmet catch type of stuff, right? Or the 2018 NFC Championship no PI call, right? I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it swayed the outcome of the game. It changed momentum. Yes, I'm not going to tell you it changed the outcome of the game, but definitely it was a momentum shifting play that you could argue contributed to the conclusion of the game and how those games and how they played out. And what people like to people like to say with this is because that one little moment you get lucky or you get unlucky, it means that the best team doesn't always win. And well, yes, that is true. The best team on paper doesn't always win, but also, so we'll go back to the 2007 Patriots. Go back to that play or that team or that game. Definitely, it's obvious the Patriots were the better team that year. They were 16-0. They were undefeated, and then they lost. What the heck is that? Never mind. Got sidetracked. Gotta love it. But ultimately, guess who the better team was that day? The Giants. No matter how many times we can talk about, how the 07 Patriots, one of the greatest teams ever, well, guess what? When it came to Super Bowl Sunday, who was the better team that day? The New York Giants. They were. They were the better team that day. They won it. They won the Super Bowl. And they want to talk about how that diminishes because, they had something go their way, so they won. No, they were the better team that day. They won. No one's saying that, the New York Giants were definitely in 2007 were better than the New England Patriots. No one's saying that. But when it came to it on Super Bowl Sunday, the Giants were the better team and they won the Super Bowl. Plain and simple, differentiate the two. Don't muddy them together because it creates an argument that makes zero sense to me, at least. Another thing too people like to talk about is strength of schedule. Like I can't recall like a team that like really had like a easier schedule and won the Super Bowl off the top of my head. I'd have to go through it for a while and maybe look up some things on my computer. But to talk about one of the other arguments that people make to diminish it, or talk about like how championships don't like they undervalue the greatness that they provide. Like, oh, they had an easy schedule. What? Well, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, that doesn't matter. Yes, strength of schedule does play a role, but also at the same time, are we really going to discredit a team because maybe they had an easier schedule? Sure, but we're going to discredit them because they made the most of the opportunity. They made the most of the opportunity given to them. They took advantage at every facet possible and made it work. We're going to take that away from them? No. Why? Why should we? They made it. They made it work. They won the Super Bowl, didn't they? And how why should the strength of schedule take away from the fact that they won the Super Bowl and they did everything they could? Not to mention, even if you had an easy schedule in the regular season, when you go to the playoffs, you're facing against the best teams in the NFL. So I mean, saying that they had an easy schedule, well, guess what? The playoffs weren't easy. You had to go up against the best teams in the playoffs, and you got through it. Take the '07 Giants. They made it in. They were a wild card team. They didn't even win their division. Wait. Did they win the division actually? They probably did. I was thinking about it as a on the current playoff seeding format. I'm stupid. Uh, Even then, what am I talking about? Either way, they were a wild card team, regardless if they won the division or not. They were a wild card team, meaning they had to play in the wild card. They had to go to the divisional, NFC championship game, and ultimately win the Super Bowl. They had to beat four really good teams back to back to back to back in order to make that happen. And no matter how easy the Giants' schedule was that year or not, I don't know. They still had to beat. Went back to back to back to back. And if I remember that year, when they beat the Packers in the NFC Championship game, I think the Packers were the number one seed that year. Someone correct me on that if I'm wrong. But I think they were definitely a higher seed than New York, and the Packers. At least they were a very good team. I think they were better. You make the argument that they were better than the Giants that year, but they still went through. They still went to Lambeau, and they still won it. They still went in there, and they did the thing, and they did it. They won. So the strength of schedule does not take away from a team's Super Bowl victory. And another one, and this will preface the individual greatness, is substance. And this goes back to overvaluing rings. A lot of people, when people talk about, or we'll go back to Michael Jordan. Oh yeah, 6 rings, she's the GOAT. That's it. If rings measured greatness, then are we going to sit here and say Jimmy Garoppolo's on the same level as Peyton Manning because they both won 2 rings? No. No one's saying that. No one's arguing that. No one in human history has ever argued that Jimmy Garoppolo is better than Peyton Manning because they both have 2 rings. No one is. No one's doing that. It's same thing for Kadarius Toney, who's won the Super Bowl. And now he has 2 or 3. Does he have 3? I think he has 3 rings too, if I'm not mistaken. Wait, no. No, he has 2. He has 2 rings. But either way, we're going to sit here and say that he's better than a guy like Deshaun Jackson, who I think only won 1 ring? No. We're not talking about that. That's ludicrous. No one in human history is saying Kadarius Toney is better than Lamar Jackson. Kadarius Toney wishes he was Deshaun Jackson, but he's not. He has to learn how to catch a pass first before he can even begin discussing himself in that range. But that's a different conversation. But yeah, just because a player has a certain amount of rings does not just the rings themselves don't measure the greatness of a player. It's that the rings are the ultimate form, of what they do, for the most part. But at the end of the day, it's just a stat like everything else. But it's not something that we should under-contextualize or over-contextualize and diminish its value, because the rings are very important when determining a player's greatness. But going back to the be-all, end-all, it's not. It's not the be-all, end-all at all. And I think there are a lot more reasons to what make a player great. And the big thing that and that defines individual greatness for me The big one is just the impact that a player makes on their team. Look at Tom Brady. Yes, you can't talk about Tom Brady without talking about his 7 Super Bowl victories. But also, none of those are possible without his work ethic, without his ability to inspire and elevate players. And that's something that people don't talk about when they talk about player greatness a lot is they don't talk about the things that are off the field. They don't talk about the stuff that appears on a stat sheet. And Tom Brady, the reason why I would make the argument that he's the GOAT, not because of his rings. Yeah, it's good to have them. And it helps bolster the argument, sure. But what's more important for Tom Brady being the GOAT to me is the fact that he worked harder than any other quarterback. I mean, he literally worked his butt off more than any other player that I've probably ever that no, any of us have probably ever known and will probably ever see again. And also, his ability to elevate in his team and make them perform in situations when it mattered is another thing too. He was a great leader, and that makes an impact. Think about. I'm not gonna actually talk about that because that's not really a relevant conversation. I was gonna say like mention Johnny Manziel or like Jamarcus Russell, but no. Of course they weren't good leaders, and of course their team didn't play well. But at the same time, Tom Brady. I mean, you in order to be a winning player, in order to be great, you have to elevate the players around you in some capacity. Now I get that this also like might delve into the talent debate a little bit, but at the same time, it takes a special player to be able to elevate the team around you, step up as a leader, and have them play better because of it. And Tom Brady was one of those players, and that's why to me Tom Brady is the best quarterback of all time because the impact that he had on his team and the impact he had on the game, the ability to work hard and the ability to just from sheer preparation and sheer just preparedness won him a ton of games. Not because he was the biggest, not because he was the strongest, certainly not because he was the fastest, but because he prepared and he worked hard. He's a prime example of you control what you control. And that's what makes him the greatest. Not because he had some incredible arm or incredible athleticism. No, it's because he did what he could and he defined what it meant to be a leader and what it means to elevate the team around you. And along with that, greatness in a player involves redefining the game. We look at guys like a big one for me is tight end Tony Gonzalez. He redefined what it means to play the tight end position. And you even look into the present with Patrick Mahomes. He's right now, whether you like him or not, he is redefining how the quarterback position is played in today's game. Right now, it's all about athleticism and being able to buy time, extend the play and be able to escape the pocket when needed. And even 10 years ago, people, yeah, 10 years ago, even not even 10 years ago, maybe like even less than like 7, 8 years ago, the majority of the NFL still preferred your standard pocket passer. You just drop back, go through your progressions, throw the ball like that. They may not be the most athletic guy, but guess what? They're going to pass the ball all the time. But here's the thing: Patrick Mahomes, he is a good pocket passer. He can throw it from the pocket and go and play more traditional quarterback. But it's his athletic tools that have really transcended him above everybody else, and that's why he's the best quarterback in the league right now. He is redefining exactly what it means to play the quarterback position in today's game, and that's something else you can't put on a stat sheet. When you think about other players, think about look at Chris Johnson. Chris Johnson was another player that also redefined what it meant to play a certain position. I wouldn't say he redefined how to play running back. And let me just branch off like this. It's not just that they redefined what it means to play a certain position or to redefine the game in a new way. Maybe it's a player that was ahead of their time. Like Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan's a perfect example if you want to go back to basketball. Michael Jordan was great because he was ahead of his time. And I think that was more important. I think that's what's more important to his GOAT conversation than the rings themselves. It's the fact that he came into the league at a time where it was just different than the game that he had himself. And because he was so different, that's what made him great. Chris Johnson, that's what made him great. Was because he was so fast. Today, Chris Johnson would be your average run of the mill running back. Maybe not average run of the mill. He'll still be really good. but he would not be nowhere near as good as he was in the late 2000s and early 2010s. Chris Johnson was so fast. I mean, when he ran a 4.24 at the combine in 2008, it quite literally broke. Like, if the internet was as prevalent as it was then, it was today, it would have broke the internet. It would have absolutely broke the internet, and he was ahead of his time. He was way ahead of his time with his speed. I mean, there's reason why. Like, there's so many highlights of him just absolutely burning everyone he runs past. No one could catch him. You literally could not catch him. The only person in the NFL at that time that could compare to the speed of Chris Johnson was Deshaun Jackson. And outside of those two guys, that was it. That was literally it. They were they were the two fastest guys in the NFL, and it was, well, I guess it was somewhat close in the grand, and when you look at numbers, but in terms of on-field play, it wasn't close. Those two guys were the fastest players, and they were ahead of their times at the time they were drafted. So those are like two reasons that measure a quarter or player's individual greatness more than what the rings do. And following here, another thing is longevity and consistency. When you look at Peyton Manning or Aaron Rodgers, yeah, they only won 2 Super Bowls, one Super Bowl. They only won a couple. But it's a fact that they once they got into the league and when they ultimately got out or slash get out of the league for Aaron, it's the fact that they played at a high level and were really good for a long time, practically 2 decades almost for the both of them. And look at Brady. He was great for 2 decades straight plus without any like super bad year or like a slump in between. No, it was just consistently great. And that's another thing that measures greatness that yeah, will sometimes well, yeah, will show up on a stat sheet, but at the same time that's appreciated. It has to be more appreciated because it shows the dedication and the effort that that player went into to be in the league and to be in such a demanding sport for so long and then produce at such a high level where he was considered one of the best at his position every year he was in the league almost. And so the and so like those are the big things for me is like the impact they made goes beyond the stat sheet, that goes beyond being on field play. It's that stuff that defines greatness more for me than it does the rings. And also, just to conclude, the thing with the rings debate, while it is a significant accomplishment, they shouldn't be the sole factor in determining a player's greatness. And I just want to conclude with when we look at Tom Brady, when we look at Michael Jordan, look at how many championships they have, everyone like aspires to win that many championships. But the bottom line is, whether you like it or not, this is something you have to accept. We all have to accept this. That only one player in a generation is going to come around and do something like that, where they're going to win a ton. Only one player comes around every generation where they win more than everybody else. Michael Jordan did it. Tom Brady did it. Joe Montana did it. And even in the 90s, it was Troy Aikman. In the 70s, it was Terry Bradshaw. One one player, and we'll just go with quarterbacks in particular, one quarterback will come around in a generation once per decade and will just win more than everybody else. And we shouldn't be looking at the Brady 7 rings, Jordan 6 rings. We shouldn't be looking at those as those are the standards that we should apply to. Like oh yeah, Brady's objectively better because he has the rings. Yeah, like that debate. Like yeah, we just talked about that. But at the same time, seeing how many rings that these players won, it's not the standard. It's not the standard. And while yes, you should, as an athlete, you should aspire to be that, and you should aspire to be better, always, of course. But simply put, just looking at the history of the game, it's an outlier more than it is the standard. And the standard is, if you're a great quarterback, you're going to win only 1 or 2, maybe 3, and then that's it. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with winning 1 or 2 or 3 and then having a guy or two have more rings than you. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just the economics of the NFL. One person will come around and will just be better than everybody else. And that shouldn't take away from the greatness that guys like Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, Peyton Manning, or Dan Marino had in the game. Dan Marino is a big one. He's considered one of the best quarterbacks of all time, and he never won a championship. But you know why? Because he redefined the quarterback position. He was ahead of his time, and even still today, to today's standards, is still one of the most prolific passers we have ever seen. To a point where even in the 2000s, I don't know about the 2010s, but even in the 2000s, if Dan Marino was in his prime, he still would have been a really good quarterback. And it goes to show that greatness isn't defined by the rings, and it's not defined, and it shouldn't be taken away. I'll say this: so it's not defined by the rings, and a player's greatness shouldn't be taken away from them because they were carried to multiple championships, or because they have this many rings, they're objectively the best player of all time. The player's great. I gotta put this together. I didn't put this in the script, so as you can tell, but a player's greatness isn't determined by the rings, and their value shouldn't be changed by over contextualizing or under contextualizing the rings themselves. What really defines a player's greatness is about what they did to the game on the field, off the field, and what they did for the game in general. Were they ahead of their time? Yes. Did they make their team better and elevate them? Yes. That stuff. Did they have the stats? Yes. The stats do matter to a certain extent. But those are the things that measure greatness more than the rings do. But I think that's it. I just settled the debate and just explained, went from start to finish, explained where it came from, what measures greatness, and why it shouldn't be in such high regard. I shouldn't say such high regard, but why it shouldn't be treated, why the ring debate shouldn't be treated as it is now. It should be treated with more of appreciation for greatness in general and what each player did that goes beyond what the rings tell you. And understanding that rings are important, but they're not the be all end all. And the players that won a whole bunch, there's only one that are going to win. There's only one quarterback or one player once in a generation that's going to win more than everybody else. It's an outlier. But that's going to do it for me. The ending there got a little interesting, but we made it through it. And I hope you guys enjoyed this rant. I enjoyed putting this together, and I got really heated when I was putting this together. So if you were expecting me to actually rant a little bit, well, I got it all out of my system before I recorded. But either way, I hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you on Tuesday when we talk about defensive linemen and linebacker prospects. No, wait, defensive lineman edge. Either way, it's going to be defense. We're going defense next week for the NFL draft preview, and we will see you. I will see you in the next one.